Whether he was playing Nico, Gino or Casey, we all grew up and watched in awe as this man effortlessly took care of the bad guys and saved the day. With his mastery of self-defense weaponry and badass attitude, he talked the talk, walked the walk and entertained a generation. He sold you the notion that one man could against all odds triumph over evil and get the girl in the end. Steven Seagal, if you're not familiar, is or has portrayed himself to be an Aikido master, actor, musician, police officer, secret agent and my personal favourite, God himself. The list really does go on. He is a man who has done quite a lot throughout his lifetime, but unfortunately his achievements and character have been brought into question in the last few years, and I don't think that even he himself can keep up with the character that he's created. But he sold us an idea of himself, because he wanted us to believe he was powerful and strong. He wanted us to be entertained. His delusions of grandeur were brought to life for us all to enjoy. And all serious allegations aside, is that really such a terrible thing? I think there's enough videos out there condemning him, and fair enough, but in this documentary I want to talk about the movies and music that he done that inspired me. I want to talk about what they mean to me and the fond memories I have of watching these movies and listening to his music. But before we get into it, if you could subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and leave a comment, it'll help this video reach a wider audience. And with that said, let's jump in. Now I've watched just about every video here on YouTube about Seagal and the damning accusations against him, and honestly, it breaks my heart. I don't want any of it to be true. The movies and yes, even the music he made was a key part of my life. Some of the best memories I have involve sitting down with my dad and my friends, having a beer or two and sharing a laugh while we watched the Steven Seagal movie and marvelled at his martial arts abilities. And while it's true that some of his movies have sucked a big one in recent years, once upon a time he was one of the kings of the action movie genre. Hollywood just couldn't get enough. Steven has quite a big catalogue of movies, but in my personal opinion, From Above the Law to Exit Wounds is where Steven Seagal is at his best. Unfortunately, any movies that came thereafter had a straight to DVD or Netflix vibe to them. The style and storyline of his modern films seems like an attempt to recapture the essence of what made films like Above the Law and Out for Justice great. But they all just feel a little off, a little too try-hard. It's a formula that doesn't really work in modern cinema with a modern Seagal, but there's nothing quite like a good Steven Seagal movie. Comparing his classics to his modern day stuff, it's honestly like night and day. His earlier films have a real magic about them. It was the right place, the right time, and they were made in the right era. Each film's story never failed to be an over-the-top, leave your brain at the door type situation that he must navigate in order to win out over the bad guys and save the day. Martial arts, guns, explosions, and intense final boss battles, that's what it was all about. But for whatever reason, this same formula doesn't seem to work for his modern films. Wrong place, wrong time, and the wrong era, I guess. Times certainly have changed. We don't even decide to watch movies in the same way as we did back then. It's like we're all on autopilot, endlessly swiping. Today we aimlessly scroll in the hopes that we might find something interesting to watch. In fact, I think we spend more time scrolling than we actually do picking something. But back in the day, on a Friday evening after work or school, you might head to your local Blockbuster to pick out a movie. It was an event. It was an accumulation of a bunch of things. You just finished school or work after the week, you got in the car and you headed to a Blockbuster. The anticipation built, and as you approached the store and you entered this calm atmosphere, you are greeted with that distinct smell of popcorn, plastic and freshly vacuumed floor. That smell filled the air as you perused the aisles. The big box TVs above were showing endless trailers of movies that had just left the cinema, all narrated with enthusiasm. You took your time walking around the store to pick a movie. It was a tangible thing. You picked up a big box, you looked at the artwork, you scanned everything with your eyes and hands intently, and you made an informed decision because this was going to be your whole weekend. After taking some time, you had an informed decision, you had the box in your hand, you took it up to the counter, and you got your video, and you left. And you left knowing that you were going to enjoy your weekend. And unfortunately, that's something you don't get with streaming services. It's not the same. Something about Seagal and the movies he made back then stood out from the crowd. In his breakout role, Nico Above the Law, released in 1988, Seagal plays the role of Nico Toscani. Nico Toscani is a detective for the Chicago Police Department. Nico Toscani. Now doesn't that sound like a name you'd find on a jar of cheap pasta sauce? Much like the real life Seagal, Nico studied Aikido with the masters in Japan and then later became a cop. Fast forward to present day 1988 and now he's a badass detective for the Chicago Police Department, busting up crack joints and taking out the bad guys. This movie has some great fight scenes and an excellent over-the-top storyline that'll keep you hooked throughout. Another great Seagal classic is Out for Justice. In Out for Justice he plays the role of Gino Felino. Similar to Nico, Gino is also a badass no-nonsense cop, but Gino is with the NYPD. Much like Above the Law, Out for Justice has some excellent, and I mean excellent fight scenes. Everything from bar brawls to shootouts, it's another action-packed story of revenge not to be missed. Above the Law, Hard to Kill, Out for Justice and Marked for Death are classic films. I cannot recommend them enough. But out of all of these, Above the Law and Out for Justice are my favourites. But the absolute creme de la creme, cream of the crop, best films he's ever made, I think, is Under Siege 1 and Under Siege 2 Dark Territory. I feel like these are the films that cemented him as a great action movie star. In Under Siege, Seagal plays the role of Casey Ryback, a chef on the USS Missouri. The USS Missouri is a battleship that's soon about to be decommissioned. But on its last day of service, a group of terrorists board the ship, lock away the crew and ultimately seize the vessel to get a hold of the nuclear weapons and get revenge on the government that screwed them over. The only man left standing in their way is Casey Ryback. But Casey Ryback is no ordinary chef. In this leave your brain at the door action-packed thrill ride, Casey must take care of the bad guys, take back the vessel and rescue the crew. The leader of the bad guys, William Stranix, played by Tommy Lee Jones, is a complex and interesting character who served his country as a CIA operative, but over time became mentally unstable and as a result the CIA tried to take him out. After a failed assassination attempt by the CIA director Tom Baker, William is out for revenge. As a kid, by default, you root for the good guys, but seeing this through the lens of my older self, I find a part of myself sympathising and almost rooting for the guy. He's actually quite a likeable bad guy. There are countless shootouts, explosions and hand-to-hand combat situations that will have you jumping out of your seat. I highly recommend Under Siege. In Under Siege 2 it's much the same story, but this time it's set on a moving train. The mentally unstable villain this time is a computer engineer, Travis Dane. Travis Dane was a computer engineer that worked for the CIA and was the main developer for their satellite weapon Grazer 1, but due to being mentally unstable he lost his job and then soon after that staged his own death. Fast forward to 1995 and we see a retired Casey Ryback enjoying civilian life and running his own restaurant in the city of Denver when he receives the news of his estranged brother's death. He soon boards a train along with his brother's daughter to attend the funeral. Travis Dane, along with a group of mercenaries, hijack that same train and set up shop in one of the cars. They connect to the Grazer 1 satellite and start causing havoc. Casey once again finds himself against the odds, having to rescue the civilians in the other cars and prevent Grazer 1 from destroying its targets. And he also has to take out the bad guys one by one. Much like in Under Siege 1, there are some great fight scenes and hand-to-hand combat scenes. It's top notch. I feel like it's just as good a movie as the first. The only thing is, I don't like Travis Dane as a bad guy. I think he's just a prick. I don't like him. Like, there isn't one redeeming quality about him. He has a punchable face. He's just a prick. I don't like him, and I don't root for him at all. I mean, just look at him. He's a loser. He's a loser. He's a skinny little loser that has to hide behind big hard guns. At least the first guy, at least Stranix was a badass. He was a rock and roll badass. This guy, bleh. If you haven't seen any Steven Seagal movies before, start with Under Siege 1 and 2, then watch the rest. But whatever you do, don't watch any of his recent films. Save those until last. And yes, I know I could have went into a lot of crazy detail about these movies, but I think if I did that, I might risk spoiling them for you, and I don't want to do that. Go and discover these for yourselves and enjoy. As I mentioned in the beginning, Steven Seagal is also a musician. He loves the blues and is an avid collector of guitars, having almost 300 in his possession. Some of the most interesting guitars he has in his collections have belonged to artists like Lenny Kravitz, Stevie Ray Vaughan, B.B. King and Jimi Hendrix. He seems to favour the Fender Strat and has an unorthodox style of playing. Much like his idol Albert Collins, he uses his thumb instead of a pick to pluck the strings, and I'm not gonna lie, the way he holds his guitar as well is pretty unorthodox. But everyone has their own style, and it's more than likely influenced by the blues. He's not a virtuoso or technically skilled to the level of any of the other players that I'd normally listen to, but he can say more with 4 chords than most can with 8. Everything he may lack, he makes up for with intent and soul, which pours out when he plays, and even more so when he sings, and well, isn't that what the blues is all about? He's also got a great voice. Bottom line, despite the comments of naysayers, Seagal is good, very good. To date, Steven has made 2 albums, Songs from the Crystal Cave, released in 2004, and Mojo Priest in 2006. Songs from the Crystal Cave was my starting gate to discovering Steven Seagal, the musician. The front cover isn't anything too special, it's just him holding his guitar, but given his notoriety, it didn't need to be anything more than this. If you've seen this in a shop, there's no way you're not going to stop dead in your tracks and go, holy shit, that's a Steven Seagal album. I have to buy this immediately. Why it's called Songs from the Crystal Cave is anyone's guess, but I can imagine that this will be his answer. While he was hanging out in Richmond near Kurtztown in Berks County, Pennsylvania, he saw a bunch of bad guys up to no good and made it his mission to stop them from discovering the secrets of the Crystal Cave up the road. Yeah, you know it's a bunch of horseshit, but because it's him, you'd sort of be like, fair enough, Steven, tell me more. And he would, because it's him. He'd tell you that after he was done kicking them all on the balls, he pulled a Fender Strat out of a nearby rock, a crystal rock, Excalibur style, and with it came the Songs of the Crystal Cave. 14 tracks of blues, modern, radio-friendly rock. Songs from the Crystal Cave is surprisingly a good album. He co-wrote most of the songs on it, and when I listened to it for the first time back in the day, I couldn't help but be just really impressed. He was an action star, and now he was a musician. He had all the makings of a good role model, and well, yeah, he became one of mine after that. Who wouldn't want to be cool, calm and collected like Casey Ryback rocking a Strat? My favourite tracks on this album are Don't You Cry, Route 23 and Better Man. Songs from the Crystal Cave peaked at number 42 in the French album charts. There was also a music video as well. The follow-up album, Mojo Priest, leans heavy into the blues, which is where Steven Seagal's voice and guitar playing abilities really shines through. But I do have to laugh at some of these song titles. In particular, Gunfire in a Junkie Joint, Alligator Ass, Talk to My Ass, Dust My Broom. They all gave me a chuckle. I'm not even going to attempt to make up a story for this one because Seagal really is a Mojo Priest. For real, he is the reincarnated deity of Buddha. If you don't want to believe me, Google it. It is what it is. It's a good album, however I do prefer the first. But despite it not being my favourite, it did have some varied chart success across Europe, so fair play. Live, he is also surprisingly good. The vibe, the aura, the music. It's shocking how good it all sounds because you're not expecting him to blow you away, but there he is doing it. The blues is the answer to a question, and Seagal, well, he's got the answers. But don't sleep on these albums, make it your business to track him down and give him a listen. So in 1998 there was this fighting video game released by Konami called Kenzai Sacred Fist. It had a look and feel to its graphics and menu system that was very similar to its competition, Tekken 2, released just a few years earlier. But the difference between the games was that Kenzai went for realism in its combat mechanics and Tekken was more of an arcade style beat 'em up. Now the reason I mention this game is because there is a character in it that unmistakably resembles Steven Seagal. Everything from how the character looks to his mannerisms to his fighting style is all classic Seagal. Now for whatever reason, probably legal, the character is named Douglas, but man, that don't look like no Douglas. Kenzai was a game myself and my friends used to play often, and we used to get such a kick out of picking Douglas and watching his hands flail about just like Steven Seagal's does. Steven Seagal is a legit Aikido master. Originally the martial art was developed for samurais to defend against a sword when they lost their own in battle. It's all about deflection. Now this looks great in film and of course in video games, but in real life apparently it's pretty useless, and it's one of the many things that have been brought into question about Seagal. But if I'm honest, all that kung fu fighting bollocks in general looks sort of mental, I seen a Kempo karate demo a few months back and I had my eyes rolling. I was thinking to myself, ah yeah, that's applicable in a punch-up. Sure, I could use that. But back in the day, we didn't question or want to question any of it. We just wanted to marvel, and that's what we did. Trying to find anything positive about Steven Seagal today is hard done in this sea of hit piece drama videos. But fair play to Jessi Enkamp, who went out to Dubai and actually met Steven. He got a great interview and actually sparred with him. It was a fantastic watch, and I really felt that it left it up to the viewer to make their own conclusions about him. Another great video shining a positive light on Seagal was a follow-up video on the martial arts journey with Roka's channel, where Jessi himself answered a lot of questions everyone wanted to know. I'll leave the links to those two videos down in the description. For all his faults, Steven Seagal tried to be everything you wanted him to be. He's been an actor, a policeman, a musician, a video game character, a businessman, an environmentalist, and even a god. Steven Seagal, the character, and the roles that character played are something I will always cherish. The characters he played inspired me and gave hope to a generation. In nearly every film he was in, he played the role of a tough guy do-gooder. He was one of the greatest lies ever sold by a man who, judging by all of these hit piece videos and accusations, if at all true, could be a very wicked person in real life. But the character, well, he was literally everything, both on screen and off. He's one of my childhood heroes, and I will always cherish the memories I have of watching those films, play fighting and pretending to do all the moves with my friends and family. Happiness, good times, inspiration. These are all the reasons I'm choosing to separate the art from the artist. That other guy, Steven Frederick Seagal, for me, that's someone else completely. That's someone so far removed from the beloved character I recognise. That man is a parody and fails in comparison. That man literally looks like a cock wearing glasses and a fake moustache. He looks like Steven Seagal et Steven Seagal. It just can't be him. I just can't bring myself to believe the hype that's been said about him either. I know, I'm in denial, but just let me, okay? I prefer the illusion, and I think if you've watched this far in, you probably do as well. The character of Steven Seagal, I think, is someone that Steven Frederick Seagal wishes he could have been. Maybe like all of us, the reality of who he really was inside didn't measure up. And maybe in all of his best efforts, despite the really bad stuff he's allegedly done, Steven Seagal is the character he's tried his best to become and maybe continues to this day to become. I'd like to think he's working on it, but there he is, randomly eating some lad's carrot. Fair enough. Today he apparently lives in Russia and is a special representative for Russia. With all the allegations stacked against him, I don't think we'll ever see him return to Hollywood. And I think that's where I'm going to leave this video. But I want to pass the question off to you, the viewer. Where do you stand on the whole Seagal situation? Be sure to let me know in the comments. This has been Steven Seagal, the greatest lie ever sold by Richie Kearns Productions. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.